most times no one really knows exactly what we're doing.
Completely.
Right? And if you think about that and think about the fact that everyone in your space is just trying to figure out, even if, they have 20 years of experience or 2 months, they're trying to figure out the best answer.
Welcome to Maker's Mindset. I'm your host, Nancy Twine. In this episode, I'm in conversation with Alisa Carmichael, an investment partner at VMG Partners, a leading investment firm that backs category-disrupting consumer product companies like my company, Briogeo, The Honey Pot, Drunk Elephant, Rowan, and many, many more. In 2015, Alisa made a career transition from investment banking at Wells Fargo to consumer private equity. At VMG, Alisa spearheaded the Parity Collective, an investment initiative focused on investing in and nurturing founders of color across the consumer industry. As a visionary leader and changemaker, Alisa has earned her place in a field that's often noted for its lack of diversity. She excels as a mother, investor, and mentor, inspiring many with her insight and resilience. Let's go ahead and jump in. So welcome, Alisa. I'm so happy to have you here. We've actually known each other for several years now, both as friends, but also as business partners, because your investment firm, VMG Partners, actually became my first institutional partner, private equity firm for Briogeo back in 2019. And we made some history together. We sold Briogeo just 3 years later to the Wella company, which is insane. And I just feel like you've seen like the underworkings of my entrepreneurial journey in a way that like a lot of people haven't. And I will tell you, one of the things that I've been so impressed with you about, Alisa, is that you are such a confident person and you are so good at what you do. You're such a great investor. But I know you actually didn't get your start in investing. You actually started your career at Wells Fargo before making a transition to private equity. So what motivated that shift and how did you make that all happen?
Yeah. I mean, before going there, I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, thank you.
Being a part of your journey was amazing and a great memory and experience. And I think we did something that will, change the trajectory for a lot of other businesses to come. And that came from you and your ideas and you kind of having this conviction that you could build something amazing. So
thank you for that.
Yeah,
thank you. I think we both just inspire each other truly. And that's what I love about our friendship.
For sure. Yeah. My journey, oh my goodness. So I grew up in a lot of different places. Family lived in Mexico City and we were expats when I was in high school and didn't know what I wanted to do in life. And as a woman, as a person of color, my parents really leaned into this idea of get things that people can't take away from you because they felt that it could be harder potentially. And if you have these real skills that you have and they are yours, you can always figure something out. So went to Yale and kind of got my degree. That was a big family experience that everyone was super excited about. And then it was like, okay, what's next, right? Yeah. And the same sort of thing kind of went through my head. And I said, hey, if I know how to financial model, then I can apply that to any business, even if I don't know where I want to end up right now. So went into investment banking, which is not for the faint of heart by any means, was not necessarily easy. It was hard. If you know anything about banking, which you do, the personalities can be really challenging. It's super cutthroat.
Crazy hours too.
Crazy hours. And, I ended up staying for a couple of years, but really said, hey, I don't think finance is for me. I'm a super collaborative person. I like to work together. I want to have fun. I want to laugh. And thought I would go into something different, but found VMG and kind of they found me and ended up saying, hey, let me take a chance on investing. There's an opportunity to work with great founders and be strategic and use analysis and information to inform decisions. And so ended up coming over to the investing side and kind of been there ever since, almost 10 years at this point.
So I mentioned earlier that I've just been so impressed by your level of confidence, especially because I know you probably sit in a lot of rooms where you don't see yourself represented. And, imposter syndrome is a common challenge, especially amongst minorities in high-powered positions. How has that impacted you throughout your career? And, what strategies have helped you to maintain your confidence and just your power in the workplace?
Oh my goodness. I've had imposter syndrome for a long time. I still do, right? I don't think that it's something that you fully grow out of, but like you said, I think you really start to figure out what you need to work through it. When I first came into investing, I had come from, again, investment banking, where I was told over and over, you're not the top analyst. You can't go into private equity. Only the best of the class can go in and do that. And so when I got into investing, I was like, oh my gosh, they're going to realize I'm a fraud. One day, someone's going to realize I'm a fraud. And, I have a story that sticks with me all the time because I remember my boss emailed me and she said, hey, I want to grab lunch tomorrow. And I was actually with my family at dinner and I started crying. And my parents were like, what is wrong? Like, what is going on? And I was like, I think I'm getting fired tomorrow. Like, my boss, she wants to meet me. She wants to meet me tomorrow. She set the time. It's all happening, right? All the things I thought and all the moments where I thought, okay, they're going to realize I'm not smart enough to be in this room is coming to be. And turns out she just wanted to mentor me and wanted to get to know me better. But I had this whole story in my head. And I think so many of us live life with these stories that we're telling ourselves of why we don't belong somewhere. For me, it's about community. I lean into people that pour into me in the moments where I need them. And it's people who say, you're great. You deserve to be here. You are smart and you're capable. And those moments where you're feeling the weakest, being able to pick up the phone and call a friend or a family member and say, hey, I'm really struggling. It takes a level of vulnerability. But I think for me, that's been really important. Just knowing that there are people who will say, I don't know what's going on, but you're smart enough to be there.
Totally.
Is all that matters. And then really thinking about my own self-talk. The reality is, in a lot of spaces, there's no right or wrong answer. And I say this all the time. It's so many decision trees. We're just making decisions, moving forward and making another one. And so most times no one really knows exactly what we're doing.
Completely.
Right? And if you think about that and think about the fact that everyone in your space is just trying to figure out, even if, they have 20 years of experience or 2 months, they're trying to figure out the best answer. For me, I just always remind myself that we're all figuring it out. None of us are all knowing. And, it's helped me to kind of quiet that voice sometimes, but it still comes. It still comes. And it's something that if you have imposter syndrome, you might have to deal with, kind of long term.
Yeah, no, completely. And you're right, because sometimes you see other people out there and they look so confident. They look like they have it all together. I remember I was at this panel and there was a woman on the panel who was just so brilliant. She was so confident and so strong. And I chatted with her after the presentation and she was like, oh my gosh, really? I was so nervous. I was practicing for that all night long. And it just like humanized the fact that we all go through it. And sometimes that helps too, right?
It totally does. And I think one of the things that I feel is so important to remember in business and investing and being an entrepreneur or being an investor or being in other roles is sometimes there's real power in vulnerability.
Yeah.
And the moment you let your guard down and tell someone something, authentic and real and say, hey, I was so nervous, it gives other people power to lean into whatever they're feeling too. And sometimes you feel even more confident by knowing, hey, I'm not the only one who is nervous or doesn't feel like I always belong. And so I always try and lean into, Nancy, vulnerability and just keeping it real and saying exactly how I feel, even if it's uncomfortable.
Totally, completely. So the firm that you're at now, VMG Partners, is a private equity fund that primarily invests in consumer businesses.
Yeah.
So for those who are unfamiliar, can you talk about what private equity is and how it operates at a high level?
Yeah. I think investing sometimes can be really complicated and talk to so many entrepreneurs who are so intimidated by this space. At the most basic level, you as an entrepreneur, and we can talk about you as just an example. You were building Briogeo. You had a ton of traction. You were really excited about all the opportunities for the business. I remember us talking about it in the early days. And you felt like, hey, I could use additional resources from a capital perspective to make sure we have all of the dollars and the people and just all sorts of things to make sure we get it to the next level. But I could also use partners around the table when I have to think about tough decisions, people I can pick up and say, hey, what do you do? And how should we think about it? And so that's really what your investment partner was. That's what we became to you, is a provider of capital. So you invest in the business, and for that, you get an ownership stake in that business. So you're really invested in the success of the business, but also a partner and someone who is along for the journey. They know the inner workings of the business, and they can be there to support you kind of through the next level. And then when the business hopefully grows to some crazy, unexpected levels, you may find another home for it and decide, hey, I'm going to go through this exit. And we, as your investment partner, participate in that with you. So we're really kind of investing early and hoping to have upside as the business grows and, see a win-win for the investor and for the entrepreneur.
Completely. And I'm so glad that you highlighted the fact that when you bring on a private equity partner, it's not just about bringing in capital, but it's about how does that framework help to support your business? Because in my instance, one of the things I really needed support on was professionalizing my organization, bringing in a management team. And I couldn't do that alone. Yeah. And having, you and Robin and others, even help to vet candidates to help me think about the org structure based upon what you knew about the other companies that you invested in, right?
Yeah.
Because there's so much value in being able to see things happening at other businesses so that you can apply them, to the other investments.
Totally. That's a huge part of it. And I think there's a lot of different types of investors. I tell entrepreneurs all the time, find people that really understand your business and the category and can add some of that perspective that you as an individual entrepreneur may not have because you're really focused on your business.
Yeah.
I remember we would talk about things like distribution strategy and healthy growth and how we think about growing and what the profitability of the business should look like.
Yeah.
Should we spend on this campaign or should we invest in another person on the team? Those are all conversations that I think a good investor can be super helpful on. And we had a lot of those conversations together.
Totally. Absolutely. Well, now as a mentor and investor myself, I get tons of pitch decks. I'm sure that you do too. But beyond just the pitch deck, what elements do you think make a business really stand out from your perspective?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I think about. Number one is knowing your category as an entrepreneur, knowing the category that you're in, and then knowing why your business is disruptive. Why does this need to be in the world? And what's different about it? And if you can't explain to me what's different, then it's really hard for me to understand why I should invest in your business versus the person next to you. A lot of investors are getting a lot of pitch decks, a lot of opportunities to look at different businesses. So I always want to understand why this business is special and going to be disruptive. And that may be an ingredient story. That may be a new service on the technology side that you're thinking about. That may be, a host of things. But the best businesses really can articulate their point of difference. Yeah. I think the second thing is just around growth. Like, where do you see this business going? How do you see it growing? If you're in a retail store or you have a location for your business, and this is on a branded side from a consumer perspective, how is that performing? How do you think you're going to see growth in 3 years and in 5 years? And does that feel realistic? So we spend a lot of time going through your financial model and understanding what you're kind of building, what that looks like. And look, no model that we start with is the same when we end, but it at least gives us a good roadmap. I'd say the final thing is really, you as a founder. When we're looking at pitch decks, sometimes there's something special about the founder. And this goes back to the confidence point. I think confidence, you notice confidence the moment that someone walks in the room. But at the end of the day, we're believing in you and what you're building. So getting to know you and understanding you as a person and the characteristics about you, what makes you a good leader, What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses so that we can build around that, right? We can't be everything. Those are some of the things that I think about when I'm looking beyond the pitch deck.
Those are really good ones. And how do investment opportunities typically find their way to you? And what can entrepreneurs do to get on the radar of investors?
Yeah, there's so many different ways. One thing that I always recommend to entrepreneurs is think about investment partners way before you need investment. I don't know how many years we met before
Oh
we
my
ended up
gosh,
partnering with
many.
Briogeo. It had to be 2 to 3 years that we had known each other.
Yeah.
You had also known other members on the VMG team for years, and we had built a relationship before, we invested in the business. There was a level of trust there. We had talked about what was going well, what was challenging. We had gone through different exercises together. So by the time, it was time to invest, that relationship was established and we were able to hit the ground running on how we were going to see the business move to the next level. I think, as I think about how opportunities reach investors, a lot of times people are building relationships early. So that's something to think about. There are so many different avenues to get in front of investors. There's the avenue that many people use, which is building their network, going to networking events. There's a lot of investors that go to different trade shows for different categories. I know our fund spends time in food and beverage and beauty and wellness and the pet space. We are at all sorts of trade shows.
Expo West, East, all
Expo
of them.
West. I mean, you name it. We go, and that's a great way to get to meet investors. Make sure that you kind of are on. Go and put your best foot forward, even if it's not an investor event, because you may meet someone. I think a lot of times a path that people don't take is talking to their retailers. If you're in retail, we spend a lot of time with the retailers in our space. And so ask them, hey, who are good investors in the space? I'm thinking about bringing someone on. A lot of times they may actually be able to facilitate a really strong introduction for you to someone that they trust, that they know is in the space. You would be surprised the number of cold emails that I get. And I answer them because you're never too good to chat with somebody for 30 minutes about their business and what they're building. So if you think that there's an investor that could be right for you, I wouldn't send out an email blast. A lot of times it's a personalized email and wanting to get to know them and why that can really kind of potentially open a door for you. So I would say, again, start the journey way before you actually need investment so that you're able to really canvas, build relationships, and find the right
That is
partner.
such great advice. Thank you for that. And so when you find a company that you're excited about and now you're working towards a deal, a big part of those negotiations is coming to, fair terms on a valuation that both sides feel good about.
Yes.
So how do you approach valuing a company, especially if a company doesn't have a ton of financial history?
Yeah. So I say that valuation is art and science. We as investors, we look at something called comparable transactions. And so we look at your category, we look at other deals that have happened and kind of see how they were valued. And for us, that's kind of a starting point and can help us kind of say, okay, most businesses in this space, let's say beauty, for example, are valued based off of a multiple of revenue, meaning, we take your revenue and we multiply it by a number. Well, what's that number? That number is defined by those comparable transactions and, kind of how we look at the space. But that doesn't always tell the full story, right? Because are we talking about your current revenue? Are we talking about your historical revenue? Are we talking about your future revenue? All the investors that you're talking to may think about it a little bit differently, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So that's one piece of it is the math of looking at multiples and kind of thinking about how that may apply to your revenue or your profitability. Those are two big financial metrics that investors look at. But sometimes that may not tell the whole story, especially if you're early on. And I think that then people think about ownership percentages. So it's something to think about as an entrepreneur. For investors, you want to own a piece of the business such that, you feel like you're part of the team, you're putting in that work from a partnership perspective. So early on, most early stage investors do want a sizable ownership percentage. That sometimes dictates the value because depending on how much money they're putting in and what ownership percentage they want, that may tell you a value in and of itself. I always think about entrepreneurs and how they should think about it. One, I think you should think about ownership and dilution. And so if you are taking on an investment now, will you need another investment in the future? Are you just thinking about one investment now and that's all you're going to be diluted? Or is it going to continue down the road and ultimately trying to ensure you don't get to a place where you look up 5 or 6 years from now and you own a small piece of your business because you've had to raise capital over and over again? I think the second thing is how much money you're bringing in from a capital perspective. What size investment do you need? And people think about this a lot of different ways, but I think that people should get really focused on understanding the cash flows of the business. How much cash is going out each month? Know that number, know generally where it is. And it's obviously going to change month to month, but how is that going to evolve as you bring on investment? Are you going to spend more in certain areas? Understanding how much cash you need is really important so that you don't become too diluted or you don't end up in a situation where you look up and you have to raise again in 6 months and you're going through this journey again. And then I think the final thing, again, is the point on valuation, and try the best you can to understand where other brands in the space are trading and kind of what those valuations are, because ultimately it can give you a sense of if you're getting a fair deal or not. There's a lot of other things that go into deals, but those are some of the early things that I think early entrepreneurs should think about.
Yeah, I think that's so important too, especially the part about really understanding your cash flow needs. Because I know some entrepreneurs that end up on this like fundraising hamster wheel where it feels like every 12 to 18 months they're trying to raise another round. And over time, you're just diluting yourself as an entrepreneur in the business. And before you know it, I know some founders that have poured their lives and savings into businesses and only own such a tiny piece because of that.
For sure. It's really unfortunate, I think, at the end too, because you're working so hard. And most entrepreneurs I know are working so hard. It's another baby.
Yeah.
I just had a baby, so I put everything in the context of babies, but it's a baby. And so you want to feel like you're rewarded at the end. I think the flip side is, some people get so focused on dilution that they don't bring on the right partner. And so it's really a balance around thinking about what's happening today and kind of what may happen in the future, and making an informed decision, kind of based on those two pieces of information.
Completely. So in your words, Alisa, you've stated that my absolute favorite part about my work is building relationships with founders and becoming an extension of their teams to help them succeed. Love that so much. However, there's often a perception by founders and entrepreneurs, some of them, that investor relationships can be daunting. So can you talk about what makes for a successful and collaborative investor and founder relationship?
Yes, the number one thing is trust. I love the relationship side of my job. There were points when we were partnered where it was hard and we were on the phone multiple times a week talking about different topics.
Especially when COVID hit, right?
Oh
my gosh. We were on the phone like every other day.
For sure. Downside planning and what's going to happen with retail and, are your retailers going to stay open? And how do we think about e-com if retail's not open? Should we invest in that now? Just thinking about growing a business, the people side of things, like you're dealing with people and their individual lives and their own journeys and perspectives. I say being a founder and a CEO is largely people management.
Yes.
But that can be really hard. And so I think, one of the things that we had was just an incredible amount of trust, knowing that the person that you're partnered with really does care about your business, but also you as the leader of your business. And I think that you build trust over time. And so a lot of times people partner with certain investors because they need the capital now and, it's going to be fine. I say bringing on an investor is like, getting into a marriage that you can't get divorced from. And so would you go on one date and get married? Most people wouldn't.
Right.
And so, I think it just really takes getting to know your partner. I often tell entrepreneurs to do references, talk to people that have worked with the investor that you're, kind of thinking about. Ask how they work with founders. Talk about a time when something was challenging.
Yeah.
That's really where you see.
That's right.
And that's where it often goes south is when everything's going great, everyone's happy. But when it's not going great, what happens?
Yeah.
And when you don't agree, right? When you don't see the world the same way, how do you get through it? Mm-hmm. Those are kind of things that I think are really important in the relationship, because you're in this for, in our instance, 3 years, 5 years, sometimes 10 years that you're partnered with this person or this group. It's really important to make sure you get to know them.
I think a really big part to getting to a place of mutual trust comes with alignment.
Yes.
Because the more that you can have real conversations up front about your ambitions, your goals, where you want to take your company, what an exit can look like, the more that you're on the same page from the beginning and you even have some of those uncomfortable conversations, that's what really helps to create that strong foundation.
For sure. But I also think a big piece of it too is reflecting as an entrepreneur on what you want. Mm-hmm. Not everybody wants a hands-on partner who's going to pick up the phone and call them multiple times a week. You love that, I think, having real partnership. And we were, building together and with your team, and would have conversations with your team multiple times a week.
Because I was also, too, I was a first-time CEO and I didn't know what I didn't know. Yeah. And so having you all in the mix was really helpful to me, because you all, too, are like my eyes and ears, the things that I didn't see, maybe you saw. And so I got a lot of value from that.
We tried to be as helpful as possible, but you may be a founder who says, I don't really want someone poking around and asking questions and telling me that they think something should be done differently or proposing a different idea. And so, assessing what you feel like will be best for you is really important. Not every investor is in the weeds and hands-on. There are investors who say, hey, give me a quarterly check-in or a check-in once a month. And maybe that's best for you. I think it's okay if that's best for you too.
Completely. So pivoting a little bit to personal life, it's been almost a year since you gave birth to your first beautiful child, your son, Caden. And as a proud mother, how do you balance a demanding career with really being a present caregiver?
Oh my gosh, it's a evolving and everyday thing. Mm-hmm. I knew when I had children, I wanted to be really present. I grew up with a really present mother and father, and I want to be at the sporting games. I want to make waffles in the morning. And so it just is hard. Like, there's no other way to say it. Community is super important. I think about people who don't have strong community all the time and how challenging it must be. Mm-hmm. I have an amazing husband who I rely on. A lot of times people talk about this concept of being a default parent, the parent that has to think about everything from laundry to, is the soccer match on Saturday and the doctor's appointment. And I really wanted to make sure that I wasn't the only person thinking about those things. And so my husband, Brian, and I do a lot of planning together, a lot of business meetings is what I'd call them.
Steven and I do the same thing. And I'm like, this is so unromantic, but it has to be done, right?
It has to be done when you're busy and making sure you're on the same page. Mm-hmm. I've gone through a lot of journeys just at work in the last year and figuring out how to balance travel, because we travel a lot for our job, to pumping on the airplane, to thinking about having to log off. My kids go to bed at 6:37. At the end of the day, I want to be with them for the last couple of hours before they go to sleep. So I generally say the hours between 5 and 8 p.m., not good for me.
Yeah.
We're in the middle of bath and dinner and tantrums and books and
all
treats and everything. Yeah. And so it's been quite a journey. And I think it goes back to the point of vulnerability. Mm-hmm. I talk about it. When people ask me how it is, I'm like, it's crazy. What tips do you have? It's really important not to make it seem like it's just so easy and I've got it. Mm-hmm. When really, every day is super unique. on the journey of parenthood. I also have a stepson who's 3. So I am in the trenches of 2 little boys. And, it's just, it's not a perfect balance. But I try and figure out the moments where I can prioritize really leaning into what has to happen at work. And those other moments where I can say, hey, you know what? That can wait till tomorrow. Like, yes, my old self would have done that last night at 8 p.m., but it's not going to happen tonight. It has to happen tomorrow morning, and not feeling guilty about that.
Yeah. And so on that note, what sort of advice would you offer other moms who, are working in a corporate field, who fear they may lose their professional edge after becoming a parent?
I'd say, first of all, give yourself grace. Like, I think a lot of people, they have their baby, they come back and they think that they're going to be able to figure it out right away. And for me, the first couple of weeks, even the first couple of months, I was just exhausted. And I was just trying to hang on and kind of get through relearning how to get back. But I tried not to put too much pressure on myself early on, because it is just a completely different experience. I think the thing that I think about a lot, though, is I'm a better version of myself now. Yes, I'm not as quick maybe as I used to be. My mom brain comes in from time to time, but I am way more efficient. I have way less time for, kind of the BS that kind of sometimes creeps into workspaces, because I don't have time. I want to go home to my kids. So what are we talking about? Do we need to talk about it? Do we need to make a decision? And let's move on. And so I actually feel like becoming a mom made me better.
You value your time differently.
I value my time different. I feel like even the empathy piece of it, and just the emotional side of me. I'm already an emotional person. I'm even more emotional now. And so I would just encourage new moms to really think about all of the incredible things that have evolved out of becoming a parent, and then how you can apply those things to the workspace.
Absolutely.
And reminding yourself that, you're handling a lot of things, and even when you feel like a D student, you're probably doing a lot better than you think you are.
Completely. So we were talking about this earlier, and even through my conversations with entrepreneurs and founders, it is a really tough fundraising landscape out there.
Yes.
And for many entrepreneurs, that capital is like the one thing that's holding them back from that next stage of growth. So what's one piece of advice that you would give entrepreneurs that are looking to fundraise in a really tough environment?
Yes, I think have yourself be incredibly organized, incredibly organized during the period of fundraising, because it's really competitive for capital right now, and it's really hard. And what I mean by be organized is, yes, you have your pitch deck, but also have your financials pulled together, have your information on your supply chain pulled together, your sales, your marketing, so that when an investor is interested, you can get them what they need really quickly.
You don't want to lose that momentum.
You do not want to lose the momentum. And I think, that's a big piece of a process. Sometimes we have this thing called deal fatigue, where you've just been having conversations so long that it kind of fizzles, because you've just been going back and forth, and it's taking a long time. The second thing is, again, think about your cash flows. If there are opportunities to get tighter and preserve the liquidity that you have, try and do that as best you can now. I think also think about other options. So are there lending opportunities and debt solutions that could extend your runway for a period of time? With all of these options, I think it's really important to make sure you have the right legal counsel around you. Make sure you understand what you're signing. If you're bringing on a debt solution, understand the implications of that, how you have to pay that back, and what that might look like, because it actually may make your liquidity situation worse in some periods if the debt solution is structured a certain way. But be willing to get creative and be comfortable, kind of downsizing in certain areas so that you can preserve liquidity. I think that that's really important right now.
That's really, really helpful. And just pivoting again, this podcast is called Maker's Mindset. And the reason for that is because I really believe that to get from A to B, to reach your goals, to really do something incredible, it's not just about having an idea, but it's really having a mindset of resilience so that you can push through all the challenges and all the unforeseen hurdles. Can you talk about how mindset has played a role in getting you to where you are today?
Oh my goodness. Mindset is so important. I think about my own mindset around things all the time and reflect on it all the time. One of the things that there is no substitute for is hard work and conviction behind what you're building. I think a lot of founders who have been successful have that. It's a little bit of the by any means necessary mindset. And I think I have that mindset too. When I partner with founders and with brands, I take on a little bit of it too and kind of have this like, I'm going to work incredibly hard to get to the place that we need to get to for this brand. I think you have to be really protective of your mind. There are so many influences, so many people that tell you can't do it, so many reasons that you could be convinced that something should or shouldn't happen, that you really have to make sure that you're just keeping a hold of your mindset, what you're letting in and out and into your spaces. And becoming a parent has actually made me even more focused on how I show up every day so that I can be the best person at work, the best mom, and ultimately like the best human being that I can be. And so it would be not honest to say that our mindset is always great. And even if you're someone who shows up in environments in a certain way, I still think, it's there are bad days. And on those days, just kind of accepting them for what they are and then moving forward and really trying to have the best mindset you can to ultimately get to where you're trying to go.
Completely. It's so good. So, Alisa, before we wrap up, we're going to pivot into 5 fire facts. And this is just a really sort of rapid fire interview that gives our audience a candid glimpse into some of your perspectives and personal hacks. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Top skill every investor should have.
Adaptability.
Most influential book in your life.
Oh my goodness. This one's hard. You know what? I think right now I am reading a lot of fiction books on my drive to work.
Okay.
Where it gets me out of anything else. It's just purely for enjoyment.
Nice.
And so a book that I'm reading now, it's not necessarily influential. It's called The Women. And it's just I try and find these books that have really great stories that, kind of give me space to escape. And so that's what I'm using reading for.
Love that. Favorite way to unwind?
Oh, bath.
So
I could be at a dinner or go out or anything and come home at midnight and I still might get in the bath to unwind.
So nice. Quick tip for effective mentorship.
If you're the mentee, come prepared with what you're hoping to get. Guide the conversation. Take control. Don't rely on your mentor to come with all of the wisdom and just spill it to you. Ask for what you need.
Good. Very good one. Go-to activity with your sons.
Oh, my favorite part of the year is coming up because we can go outside, pull out the kiddie pool, and just run around with our speaker and our snacks in the backyard. So really just hanging out and playing and splashing around in the hose and in the pool.
So fun. I love that so much. Alisa, thank you so much for being here. This was such a great conversation, and I'm so happy that we have such a dynamic relationship like this, and thank you for all the gems that you shared with our audience today.
Oh, thank you. No, and thank you for doing this and for being the founder that you are and seeing the opportunity to build beyond just Briogeo and what you've done, but ultimately helping other founders and individuals be the best founders they can be and the best people they can be.
To stay connected with Alisa, the Maker's Mindset community, and me, check out all the details in the episode description below. And don't forget to subscribe to this series, leave a review, and share this episode with your community. Thanks so much for tuning in.